So we're very excited to have a nice weekend together. We would really like to thank Michael to come with us here. Michael Gouda is a great speaker, and we're very excited to speak for him to speak to us about communications. We're going to have an opportunity after each of the two talks today to have a small workshop discussion with each couple, and then we're going to have other talk later on today. And then at nighttime, we can just sit informally and talk about it. Michael, thank you so much again for coming.
No, thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me. Okay, so a little bit, first I wanted to say thank you guys for having me. I wanted to also make sure that we're sitting beside our partners. Sometimes when I do these talks, the guys are on the so no, that's good. So everyone's together. Just give you a little bit of a tidbit of myself. So I grew up in Mississauga, went to St. Mary and St. Athanasius, and I went to school. I'm a pharmacist, went to school at U of T, graduated in 2009, which seems like ages ago. And I am now we own a pharmacy in Oakville. I live in Oakville with my wife. My wife is also a pharmacist for Ham. We have 3 kids, Grace, Nathan, and Elizabeth, who are now 12, 9, and 9. The 2 younger ones are twins. So they're growing up fast on us. As I was kind of growing up, I wanted to delve a little bit more into the marriage and family space. So Abhinav Shoy, who's kind of like my mentor in all of this, recommended I started doing a little bit of studying. So I started studying a bit at Canada Christian College, did some like a certificate program in marriage and family, just to see if I could like pick up a paper and read and write again, because do essays and stuff, which is foreign to me. But yeah, I was very interested in learning. So I started doing also my master's in. So I'm still in the very young spot, but I'm starting to learn a lot more about this space, and we're just trying to, talk to couples just like this, and talk to parents, and we're all going through the same stuff, right? So why not get ahead of it? And kudos to you guys for coming out and trying to essentially get stronger in your marriages, right? Which to me is one of the most important relationships we're going to have, right? So I hope we all agree, right? So let's start. I wanted to just read a little excerpt from this book, talk about some communication. We'll talk about communication kind of like holistically, this one, and then we'll hone in a little bit more in the second talk. We'll talk about some more like, there's going to be a lot of practical stuff here, but there's going to be even more practical, and also some research I really wanted to share with you guys that may be eye-opening, right? It was eye-opening for me. So, well, what do you think? Leslie was standing in the middle of her tiny apartment, twirling around to display her new dress. We had been married less than a week. I responded, "It's good. Are you ready to go? I'm starving." "Good? I'm starving? That's all you can say?" Leslie didn't have to ask this rhetorical question. It was all over her face. Of course, as a man, is something wrong? I asked. My keen diagnostic sense was just budding. No. Okay, so let's go. Wait, I'm going to change, she said. Why? You look fine. 5 minutes later, I could hear her weeping coming from the bedroom. That's strange, I thought. I walked to the door and opened it. The light was off. Leslie was curled on the edge of the bed crying. What happened? I asked. Nothing. Are you all right? Yes. Then why are you crying? Right? No response. and they both wandered in silence. This happens to us. I know it sounds trivial, but it happens to us on a regular basis. I could see some nodding from here and there. It does happen to us, and it could be from the simplest dress to something more serious, and something also brewing as well, right? So in terms of communication, it's one of the biggest things that married couples face is a breakdown in communication. All of us long for our emotional connection to be strong. That's the goal. But communication sometimes can hinder that. If we're not communicating on a deep level, I don't know about you guys, has anyone ever felt, it's hard to say, but with me and Raham, for example, sometimes after like a little bit of a good fight, not a malicious fight, but a fight where we figure things out, and now we're on the same page, and it's like, oh, I feel good, and she feels good, and we are now emotionally connected, right? Over time, right? Sometimes we take that for granted. We take that for granted, and we say, you know what, it's all good. But those emotional connections are so important that we have those discussions. And we'll talk about a little bit. The best time to build communication skills is exactly where you guys are at. Early marriage. Early in marriage. Let me ask, who's been married 1 year? Less than 1 year? More than 1 year? So a little over a year? Yeah, so this is early marriage. If it's less than like 5 years, it's early marriage. But this is the best time to kind of put in these building blocks to communicate strongly. Focusing on a few principles and practicing them on a regular basis. Here's the situation. Marriage is one of those things where it's a little bit odd, right? We've got two people from two different households who did things two different ways over 25, 30, 35 years. And now you're bringing them together and you're like, I'm in love. It's all good. We're going to figure this out. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions. And we'll talk about that also in a second. That's one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's supposed to all just flow. And if it doesn't flow, then there's an issue. But we need to communicate what we need for that to flow, right? So these two different rules, we do need to negotiate them and sometimes renegotiate them over time. I'll read you a little excerpt. Robert and Melissa. Robert and Melissa were madly in love. Before they got married, they talked into the night and spent countless hours on the phone each week. But they soon learned communication isn't always easy. Robert, just before they got married, Robert would come to one of my family's get-togethers, but he hardly spoke. And she wondered why. If somebody interrupted him in the middle of a story or a comment, Rob would just shut down. And it drove Melissa nuts. She would not understand why this was happening. It took me a while to catch on. In Melissa's family, interrupting is a sign of involvement. If you didn't interrupt, you were rude. But in Rob's family, nobody interrupted. You waited for the person to finish their thought or the topic, right? So it means that they're listening, but Rob didn't see it that way. Do you see what I mean by two different families? And just think about it as we kind of go along today. Is there something that potentially you do, right? And I really try to focus in on the you as opposed to she or he, right, does this or that. And really the foundation of love, and here's a trivia question for you guys. The foundation of what we want to speak about is that we love each other, yes? And marriage is all about that union. Now, does anyone know in the Bible what the word for love is? Like what Agape. Yeah, there's several iterations of that, but agape. Okay. And that's the Greek word for love, the original, right? Now, does anyone know what that translates to?
Unconditional love?
Kind of. So, yes. So here's the definition: selfless concern for the welfare of others. The selfless concern for the welfare of others. That's the actual official definition. So when we say, I love you, when we say, I love you, right? What are we actually saying, right? Love, in its true definition, has nothing to do with she does this, he does this. We've got to look at ourselves and then we build from there. Okay, so just something to keep in mind. Keep that definition in mind. Every time we say, I love you, let's also look at ourselves, right? And if we do that, each of us do that on a regular basis, regularly practice, man, we're in for a good run. Does that mean that things aren't going to go wrong at times and we're going to have disagreements? Of course not. Like, that's not life, right? There's going to be disagreements, but we can communicate it as we go along. So let's just talk about real quick how not to communicate, and then we'll talk about some principles on what we want to do on a regular basis. And if we do that, for the most part, we should have some good communication. So how not to communicate? Silence. Man, silence. So I actually self-proclaim, I did this early in marriage, right? It would drive her nuts, right? It would drive her nuts. And she would tell me, she's like, why are you all silent, right? And in my family, that's kind of how I knew when something wasn't right. You know what I'm saying? My dad or my mom, we got some laughs. So I would know that, okay, we shut down, we got silent, right? The problem is non-talking is a form of communication, but it's super, super negative, okay? So this is something I did early in our early marriage, and it was destructive. Because if she were to do something wrong or didn't read my mind, or we were supposed to, do this and she didn't remember it, or so on and so forth, I would just be silent, right? And that would be the communicator, but it's just not a solid communicator, right? Because at the end of the day, and something that we kind of got away from that, is she told me and I told her, if you don't talk to me, who are you going to talk to? If you don't tell me what's going on, if you don't talk to me about what's wrong or what's bothering you, who are you going to talk to? I know that sounds trivial, but at the end of the day, it's important to realize that it's just that simple sometimes, where we just got to talk to each other. Now, the other person is not going to be all ready, on defense and say, you do this and that. And so remember, we come back to love, right? What is love? The selfless concern for the welfare of others. The fear of pain, the fear of rejection is a very big thing. And we'll talk about this, and we'll talk about research that actually shows this. It is basic human nature to say, if you're going to shut me down, I'm not going to really want to bring stuff up again. All right. Does that mean that if you've done this, that, oh my God, it's over and we can't communicate? Absolutely not. It's just something to keep in mind. It's something to work on. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. Does this mean that we're going to communicate effectively in everything we do? Not realistic. Not realistic. You're going to make mistakes, but if we've got some sort of semblance of we're trying and each spouse is trying, it's a step forward is kind of what we want to discuss. Place saving, right? Place saving. So 4 styles of miscommunication. Place saving is a yes man, yes woman. Whatever you want. Don't worry about me, right? At some point, that doesn't work, right? You do not want to communicate like that on a all the time, right? And so a placeholder would be very eager to please, apologetic. It's good, but you don't want to do it too much. You don't want to do it that you are the one who is resulting in a negative in this. Okay. So placeholders have difficulty expressing anger, keeps many feelings inside, and one day, right, they get really upset or it blows, or so on and so forth. So placating is not a good form of communication. The opposite, blaming. A person that's just trying to find fault finder, criticizes, generalizes a lot, uses the words, ready? You never, you always, right? These are not useful comments. We should try to get rid of those words as best we can. You never and you always, right? Take them out of your vocabulary if you can in our marital communication, right? Blamers believe the best defense is a strong offense, right? They need to be able to speak, but not at the expense of their spouse. Another miscommunication is a computer or computing, not a computer, but a computing type of person. Super reasonable, very calm, very collected, but they never admit a mistake. They're never wrong. No. It could be you. And when asked about emotion, upset? I'm not upset. You're upset. Right? I'm not upset. They don't reveal their emotions, and they're not really interested in your emotions. Right? So they're trying to keep emotions out of the game. And lastly, you guys. And lastly, distracting, right? A distractor is someone who doesn't really want to have that conversation, right? We're talking about a serious thing. Oh, what about this? You know what I mean? We're talking about, they're quick to change the subject, right? You're talking here. What about that weather? Do you want to go out? How about what's for dinner? So on and so forth, right? Distracting, not a solid way of dealing and communicating on a regular basis. So again, you may notice some of this in yourself, and I really hope it's yourself. Don't be like, it's this guy right here, or it's this girl for sure. So try to think about how you communicate, because that's where it all starts, right? If we work on ourselves, and we're both here, we work on ourselves, we can get better. Because that's all we're going to be doing is we're just trying. Give it a shot. And then we've got hindrances to listening. Check this out. Filters. Someone is speaking, right? And I've already made up my mind about what that person's saying, so I stop listening. I stop listening. I'll give you an example. Somebody told someone, so Nick told Scylla, I'll give you the people in the example, that their daughter is having a baby. And if they can help them move. Right away, before they asked the question, Scylla started thinking about when she had kids and her labor and this. And she stopped listening to her daughter, who is requesting help, right? So filters, try to keep these things in mind in terms of, do we do this, right? Do we just try to filter out what the person's saying, okay? Certain prejudices that we have, recognize them, minimize them. And if you're not listening, right, refocus in with your spouse. Bad habits that we want to be careful with, okay? As Egyptians, we do these things, okay? At some point in life, right? So just keep these things in mind, because you may not know that you're doing them, but they may be like passed on from generation to generation, as they say. Bad habits, reassuring. Okay, ready? Your spouse is telling you something about something she's worried about, and you say, "Oh, we're gonna be fine. Everything will be okay." Right? Tries to have a positive outlook and doesn't allow their partner to express their feelings. Right? That's a big thing. We do that, with our kids too. Right? When I'm doing like a lot of the parenting type talks, this is a constant thing. Is we want our kids to express themselves and know that it's a safe place, not just, yes, at some point you've got to reassure them. Yes. But if you're reassuring them right out the gate, we do that with our spouses as well, right? We're just sitting here and saying, "Oh, it's going to be fine." That is not useful for communicating effectively. Giving advice, right? You always want to give a solution. Okay, so you want to make sure that the problem is fixed. You're not really listening, but it's like, "Oh, this person at work did this, that." Well, you should do this, right? Right? Sometimes, and we'll talk about this one specifically, sometimes we don't need the solution. We know the solution, especially the women in the room. We know the solution. We just need to have a feelings talk. We need to just let our feelings out. I know this may sound terrible for a man. Feel like we're just going to talk about feelings and go in circle, 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 circle. It's so important. It's so important. You wouldn't believe that these break down in communication, right? Let me back this up. The research has shown that it's not like some major catastrophic event that has resulted in this crazy divorce rate that we have in our society, especially in the West, Western society. It's not that someone cheated on someone. It's not that someone did something like, oof, astronomical, can't come back from them. It's not. You know what it is? It's a breakdown in communication and lack of emotional connection. That's actually the main reason, and I'll show this to you on the second talk, that couples are divorcing. So it may sound trivial, but if we don't give our spouses a forum to continuously talk to us and receive it, it's difficult to have that connection. Does everyone agree with that? Does it make sense? I know we probably did this in like the premarital retreat, but this is just a reminder. And when we're doing like courses with couples throughout, like we're doing this course now called the marriage course that we do every 2 weeks. And it's kind of like a date night for couples. This is the type of stuff that, like you work on these type of things to strengthen our connections. But this is the type of stuff that keeps coming out. It's like, I just want to feel heard. Intellectualizing. So the listener is always trying to figure out an explanation as opposed to realizing what the other person's feeling. Going off on a tangent, right? Who does this? Somebody's telling you this, that. Oh, that happened to me. Something very similar. And they go on and talk about their own self as opposed to finishing this conversation. And the last one, the most common one, is interrupting, right? You can't afford to stop a thought when you're discussing something with an interrupter. So you got to be like, this happened and they're about to interrupt. Oh, and then this happened, and you got to continue your thought because they're going to, at some point, interrupt you. These are just bad habits on how we don't want to communicate. Keep it in mind. Self-reflect. Something maybe we could take from this. So how do we want to communicate? Good communication starts with yourself. Okay? First, you have to build who you are. Okay? And only later on what you do. So your spouse should be your number one priority. I hope this is kind of like basic. Spouse should be number one priority. And we want to make sure we're holding our spouse at the highest regard. The number one priority in our life should be our spouse. And a lot of discussion when we're speaking with parents, mom or dad will say, but my kid, my child, they're my number one priority, right? And I'm not going to get into that here, but our spouse has to be our number one priority, right? Because that is the person that we're building our relationship with. And I don't want to argue it here, just in case I don't want to get off on a tangent. But I argue that it is the central relationship for everything else, meaning your spiritual life, your life as a parent, your life as a son or daughter, your life as a member of society. I find that this is overlooked very much so in our society at this point. It's overlooked. And a lot of it is just trivial little things that do add up over time. And we're not able to communicate. So we want to be able to always remember basics. Our spouse should be our number one priority and held in the highest regard, right? Sometimes we've had many friends over the years that, what's the word? Degrade their spouse. And it's funny, right? But done on a regular basis, that can be dangerous, right? Is that how we want to be treating? Is that how we want to be communicating? And your spouse may laugh and it's fine. But if we're doing that on a regular basis, I argue, where do we stand? Right? So again, a communication that you can have a discussion with your spouse and see how that would go. Always giving our spouse the benefit of the doubt. So we're going to talk about a couple of basics, and then we can just go from there. So it starts with you. 3 things that we really need in our communication is basic warmth, genuineness, and empathy. I don't really want to go through them because it's pretty self-explanatory, but this is something that just try to keep in mind. If we're warm and we're genuine and empathetic. Empathy we might just touch on. Also, did you know that 58% of the message that you're trying to portray is non-verbal? Non-verbal. That's how it's received. Only 7% is words. Only 7% of what you're saying is perceived from the words. 58%, more than half, is non-verbal, how you say it, right? And another 30% is tone of your voice, right? So just something to keep in mind. Empathy. Does anyone know from school what is empathy? Definition for empathy?
Relating to someone without not necessarily going through the same thing.
Correct. Correct. Yes. Seeing the world from your partner's perspective, right, is empathy, right? That is really, really important. So just understanding what it is they're going through and discussing it. Okay. Want to discuss rules. Okay. Has anyone ever heard about the I statements? Anybody heard about the I statements? Not that many. No? Okay. So here's a rule. You ready? You're about to communicate something to your spouse. Always start with the word I. Me. I. Don't say you. Start with the word I. I'll tell you why. Typically, when you make a you statement, it's more like it's like a blame. It's an attack, and you kind of get your spouse is like ready, like ready for defense. When you start with I, It's a lot more subtle, right? And here's an example. You are so careless. How could you forget we were going out tonight? Right? Instead, how could you have said that same statement nicer? But how could you have said that same statement? Remember, this is, a dinner that you had in your calendars for a week, and we get busy, right? We get busy, our life gets busy, and all of a sudden someone forgets, and you say,
Sorry, I forgot to remind you. I think we were out for dinner today.
yeah, yeah,
I think you are smart to remember this.
we're not giving them an excuse. Sorry, I got your back.
I feel like you're
Draw you back.
but
It's also tone.
Yeah.
You can be like, I'm sorry, I think we forgot that we had dinner, but if you sit in a passive aggressive tone.
Exactly. And that's where that genuineness comes in, and that warmth, right? Because if you say any of what we're talking about without that warmth or genuineness, be like, I thought So you got to be careful with that, right? It's that tone and that warmth and genuineness, right? So starting like I said, it's just little things that add up over time. Starting with an I, so saying something like, I feel hurt or a little scared. I feel a little scared when we forget things we planned together, right? You're not letting them off the hook, but you also don't necessarily need this to start into an all-out brawl, right? So it's a discussion using the word I to start. Generally speaking, will save your marriage a lot of unnecessary strife, right? Another one. You try to make me feel stupid by always correcting what I say. How could we say that a little nicer? Start with the word I. I wish you treat me better. Possible. So we're saying avoiding the you and starting with the I. You try to make me feel stupid by always correcting what I say. That's an all-out war.
I feel like you will misunderstand me.
Okay. Yes, I feel you misunderstand me. Not necessarily exactly the same, yeah.
I feel less than when you try to correct me.
Yes. So do you see how that kind of like diffuses the situation a little bit? It diffuses just a little bit. Now remember, if we're doing this on a regular basis every single day, and we're stressed with work, and we're tired, and you're coming home, and then someone just comes at you with like, you are so careless, or how do you think that's going to end? Like lovingly, it's going to be a great night, right? And it all starts with what we're saying, right? It's just a communication thing. So saying something, taking a moment discussing that. So I feel very put down when you correct the little things that I say, right? Little things. So start with I, generally. Practice reflective listening. This one's a little bit of a more difficult one, but in this book, which by the way, I fully recommend, it's called Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. It sounds like it's for before marriage, but we've done this with several couples post-marriage, and it's super, super good, even for if you've been married for a very long time. Just great little concepts. It's like 7 date nights that you can go on and discuss certain things. The Lord gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth. Yes? 2 ears, 1 mouth. So if you can hear, you can listen, right? Wrong. Hearing is passive. Listening is actively interacting with the message you've heard, and you're reflecting it back to the sender. Okay, I'll give you an example. Wife holding up a dress. Again, not sure why the dress examples. Look at this. It is important. So, look at this. I just got this dress cleaned, and there's a gray stain all over the collar. I can't believe it. What am I going to do now? I was going to wear this dress tonight. And the husband says, oh, honey, I don't think anyone would notice that. Besides, you could wear your yellow dress. It looks great.
Solve your problem.
And we will discuss that in terms of men and women, yes. So would you like someone to say that to you? Like the girls? It's difficult, right? Like you definitely don't want. So the husband could have said, what could the husband say in this situation? Oh no, oh that sucks. Yeah, I wouldn't say how could this happen, but I would say that sucks. Genuinely. Don't forget the genuine. Oh, that sucks. You're gonna have to get another dress. You definitely don't want to do that, right? So we want to be genuine in how we're saying it. Yes. Oh man, no sarcasm. So in the premarital retreat, I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. 15 years ago, Rahim and I were at the premarital retreat, and it said on the thing, avoid sarcasm. And it was red, underlined, bold, massive, caps lock, the whole thing. Sarcasm is a thing, right? And you've got to be careful with that. But in this, genuineness is essentially the opposite. So, yeah, all that sucks in a sarcastic tone. You're just asking for a fight there, right? So reflecting that. At the end of the day, generally speaking, women share feelings. Women share feelings. Men are trying to solve problems, right? That's kind of this is the divide, right? But you've got to realize we don't have to be this way. This could be reversed, and it also can be a little bit of both for both ends, right? Both in an equal manner. So that's something to be careful with. So make sure you really want to accurately understand what your spouse's message is and reflect what you're hearing. Okay. I challenge one of the two of you or both of you, right, to try and implement these slowly. So when, for example, this, instead of just saying that sucks, right? What could you say? Yeah, how can I help? Or let's go take a look at another one real quick, right? Even if you're in a rush, how could we get another one? Let's discuss it. That just lets your spouse feel heard and that you're gonna work through it together. Okay? And we're talking about a dress, but that can be a whole lot of different things in our lives, right? And we're dealing with. And the last thing is we really want to understand and accept the differences between men and women. This is general. I don't want any of the women or the men to get all upset with me, but this is generally, we talked about the feelings, we talked about solving the problems, right? Women in general use rapport talk, meaning when they're in conversation, they're primarily trying to form connections with other people. Men are not trying to necessarily form connections. We're trying to essentially communicate our knowledge and skill in a certain aspect of what we're discussing. So in a party, men are in big groups. They're telling stories and sharing their expertise, right? And they're telling jokes. Women are in smaller groups, right? You notice this? And they're talking about more personal subjects, okay? So women share feelings, men are just trying to solve problems. It's kind of like how we're wired, but it doesn't have to be that way. It takes a little bit of effort. Want to give you this example. The wife, you won't believe the amount of work my boss is giving me. Listen to this. And the man interrupts and says, honey, I keep telling you to talk to him about that. You can't let him treat you like that. Right? Right? Another way of doing this is having feelings. We've done this in one of the discussions, is just labeling that I want to have a feelings talk or I want to have a problem talk. Right? Just labeling it right out the front, right out the get-go. So in this situation, you won't believe the amount of work he says, honey, I keep telling you to talk to him about that. And she says, honey, I know, but I'd like to have a feelings conversation right now. If that's okay, I just need to get this out. And then the man, understanding, okay, we're just talking about feelings. All right, talk to me, give it to me, lay it all on me. Right? And then we are genuine and warm and empathetic. You're not falling asleep, so on and so forth. Right? So sometimes just labeling that, look, and maybe after this, just have that discussion with your spouse and just say, look, I want to have more feelings talks. I need to get it out. And I'd rather get it out with you. Right? And the husband in that situation, of course, will be like, I'm in. I am in. Right? And if the husband needs to have more problems, like, listen, I need your advice. I want to bounce some ideas off you. My wife will say, I'm in. Let's do this. It's a team effort. So just having that communication, that in of itself can. This is a big one. Apologize. Who here does not like to say sorry? Or has grown up in a family that does not necessarily apologize? Don't put up your hands, but this is a thing, right? It's a thing. And sometimes we don't want to look like the weaker person. And it can build a whole lot of resentment. And resentment is something we do not want to enter into our relationships at all, long-term or short-term, right? So if you've done something wrong, even if it's from previous, apologize genuinely and let it go. There's no stronger, it's just us. It's the two of us. In one of the talks a lecture I was listening to in Boston, actually, he said, we have pronouns. We have preferred pronouns in marriage. I'm like, oh God, here we go. It's all the way in Boston. We're talking about pronouns. And he said, in marriage, our pronouns are we and us. Our pronouns are we and us. And I really like that. It stuck with me. Because that's really what it is. It's we and us. It's not me against him or her against me. It's we and us. Okay? And lastly, communicate through touch. Have you guys ever heard about the love languages? Yes, I'm sure it's been you've seen it, heard about it. So physical touch is one of them. And even if one of your love languages is physical touch, this is huge. But even if it's not, holding each other's hands, we're not talking about sex. We're just talking about physical touch. We're talking about hand holding, down the thing, putting your hand on your spouse right now. See that? That's put your hands over. It's called you out. Yeah. That's be affectionate, truthful. Again, warm, genuine. Okay. So just holding hands, cuddling. So who's not a cuddler, for example? Who's not a cuddler? Yeah. I'm not a cuddler, for example. I'll talk about myself, so it's not awkward. I'm not a cuddler, right? My wife, for him, loves to cuddle, right? So we've come to a compromise. We cuddle for like 5 minutes. She could fall asleep. Pull out. Has anyone watched Friends where they do the hug and roll? So she could fall asleep on me, no problem. So I'm like, okay, Hannah, look, my arm's numb. And I'm like, we need to cut this at some point. Again, we communicated it. And so she at the beginning, she said when I rejected the cuddle, she'd be like, what's the deal? Right? But we talked about it and we said, let's cuddle, but let's put it for a certain amount of time. If I don't feel my hand, I gotta let you go. Right? So something silly, something small, but again, have the conversations. And communicating through physical touch is so important. Okay? So especially if your love language is physical touch. So talk to each other about how you used to do it at home. Right? Also discuss it, right? Because you're coming from two different households. Some people, they didn't touch, no hug, no kiss. And some people, full out hug and kiss, and different households. So try to remember it, try to be warm, try to be genuine. And these are just some rules that you could think about for successful communication. If you guys have anything else, let's discuss it. I have an exercise that we have that you guys can do together, but I'd love to talk to you guys about this if anybody has any questions, discussion. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about communication generally? Yeah.
I had heard prior, and I like that you reiterated. When you come home and you have something to talk about, and then you can establish from the get-go, this is what I'm looking for, a solution, or I want just an ear.
Yes.
If I love anyways, myself, when I'm clear, I have to be clear of what it is that I'm wanting out of the one who's listening.
Yes. So doing the feelings / problem solving.
They have to guess.
Yes.
Or I can be clear with what I want, which is I need somebody just to hear me out, or I need you to help me.
Yes, for sure. And that kind of, now. But you know what? That's so important is having those headings, right?
Also, like your communication style can change over the years, and to learn those new aspects of yourself. Like I was saying before, I would want to vent out a lot, like when I'm stressed, but now I need some alone time to just kind of think about it and then talk about it.
Absolutely. You guys, hello. No worries. Absolutely, and it will evolve over time. And the theory is, and hope is, that we're evolving together. Right? We're evolving together and working through it together. It's one of those things that if you're not communicating very well right now, or there's some things you want to work on, it may seem overwhelming, right? But baby steps is something that we can, and how can I say this? If there's something that you can do about something that you are contributing to your relationship that you believe may be not the best, you've got to address that, right? And it's got to be some self-reflection here, and it's got to say, okay, you know what? I could do better in this. And if your spouse is bringing it up to you, don't get on defense, right? Maybe have that discussion. And it doesn't mean it's got to be tit for tat. We've got, oh, they told me this, I got to give them that, right? But have that, we're a team. It's we and us. And we're trying to figure this out together. No one's going to be perfect. No one's even going to be good on a regular basis. But if we can kind of lift each other up, it would be a lot better for our relationships and our connection. Just generally. Yeah.
I was just saying, it is I think it's a lot harder said than done when you have grown up in your family and you do things, the way you communicate and talk and do things is a lot different. Like, it's just, I guess, practically, how do you get out of that way? It's difficult. I think sometimes when you've grown up a certain way and they've grown up a certain way and have a different way.
Absolutely. And I think, so what do you guys think about that? And would you guys agree? Right? Like if we were to stick to that. So coming from your homes, which you've grown up for 25, 30, 35 years, you've been doing this the whole time. Now you're coming in and you're telling me I need to change. right? That's hard. So what do you guys think?
I think setting common grounds by communicating once, twice until we set a common ground. That's how it works with me. That's how it works with you. Okay, how are we gonna make it work for us?
Yes, I love that. I love that. How do we make it work for us? And we both gotta agree. How do we make it work for us? It sounds simple, but it's not. It takes time, it takes some effort on both ends. And I think one of the biggest things as Egyptian, right? Sometimes we'll say something like, this is how I am. It's who I am, right? I can't change. And I'm not saying that you need to change your entire life because that's not realistic. And that's definitely not advocated. But the question is, are you able to tweak some stuff? Are you willing to tweak some stuff for your spouse? We hope the answer is always yes, right? And sometimes you do need a little bit of effort there. And your spouse, being the amazing receptive person they are, they're going to give you some time because it does, like you said, it's hard and it takes time.
And I think the biggest thing is to not get your family's advice, or well, it depends, but not to get them involved, or okay, what would my mom think in this situation, or what would she do? And that kind of ties to what you've learned over the past 20 or 30 years. So I think just not getting the family involved, and again, it's us, it's we.
I agree 100%. And then that's a delicate topic, but I will say wholeheartedly that it is commanded of us to cleave, right? It is commanded in the marriage ceremony that we cleave. It doesn't mean we leave our family behind and be like, good riddance, we're done with this. But this is a new union. This is a union in Christ. This is a church. This is a we. This is an us. And how are we going to move forward? Right? I agree with that wholeheartedly. Yes. Yeah.
I was also going to say, like, we have to unlearn what's not working for us and relearn a new way that works for us.
Agreed. How would we do that? Practically speaking, how would we do it? Yeah. Communicating with each other and being like, okay, and it's hard, right? But it is a deep conversation that you could have. Sometimes difficult over like a steak dinner, right? But definitely something that over time you kind of can grow together and really hone in on, you know what, I do this. It's not great from my family, right? My mom always used to do that. My bad. I'm going to tone it down, or I'm going to work on this, or so on and so forth. And for your spouse, not to be like, yeah, you do. Right? Finally, you get it. But you're encouraging, you're warm, you're genuine, you're empathetic, right? You're trying to figure it out together. It's this is our new church, and how are we going to go forward? Right? And then when kids come, that's a whole different communication, right? But it's so good for us to hone in on it now as we kind of grow. And when the kids come, it becomes, yes, there will be challenges for sure. I'm not going to lie to you. All right. 3:00, someone yelling in your face, not fun. But you can communicate it and work through it. Right? So, yeah. No, I really like that point. And yes, I agree. The new church is big. Anybody else?
You had your hand up, or say that have an open mind when each spouse can learn something new. Not take it as a challenge, but take it as a journey.
Correct. That's a really nice way of putting it. That is marriage. You're right. It's a journey, right? There's going to be some ups and downs, and it's like a road trip. As one professor put it, it's a road trip. Sometimes you're going to have some great scenery. Sometimes it's going to be mundane. Sometimes you're going to go up and down hills, but it's a journey, and you're doing it together, right? Yeah. So open mind. I agree.
it's good to reflect on what went well and then what didn't go well.
Yeah.
And then trial and error from there. For example, whenever I approach in a certain manner and then next thing you know, it's a full day thing. I learned for next time not to approach in that manner. The timing I think is a really good, like it could be a whole conversation.
Yes.
Um,
Timing, you're right, for
yeah,
sure.
like if hungry or if it's too early or if it's too nice, too late. Yeah, it has to be like almost perfection. The stars are aligned, I think.
Not necessarily, not necessarily, yeah. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It may sound like that. Hungry is the thing. Men and women, by the way.
And before sleep, like don't start something.
They do have in a lot of books, 10 o'clock rule. Nothing past 10 o'clock. Don't bring up no meaty subjects at 10 o'clock or later. That might be a little difficult, right? And then you may sleep, in a fight and so on and so forth. So yeah, timing is huge. Timing is huge. But you know what? It starts off like that, right? But if you're both kind of on the same page and you're both like, I'm gonna work on this, we're gonna work on this together, and you're both genuinely really trying, man, timing can be so quick. Right? Now, like I said, you're not going to have fights or discussions or disagreements. You're of course going to have disagreements, but now we deal with them a lot faster than a few years back, where we really, had to take a moment. But we're both on the same page.
Would you
Yeah.
say like people say usually the first 2 years you argue a lot, but the fourth year you're like good. Is it like that for most couples?
Not necessarily, no, not necessarily. You know what? It's a work in progress. To his point, it's a journey. It's a journey, and you're gonna have your ups and downs, right? But I'll tell you this: when you are both on the same page, and it's not just one person steering the ship, and it's both of you, right? That just makes life so much easier. And you are going to get in disagreement.